Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thanks everyone for joining today. I just wanted to take a little bit of your time to talk a little bit about the advanced persistent threat. My name is Brian Bailey. I work for BTV Security, and we were founded back in 2006, and we're a company that's dedicated entirely to information security and digital forensics. Really, at the end of the day, if it has to do with information security, we can certainly help out. So if you have any interest in some of the service offerings that we provide, you can go ahead and feel free to hit up our website and check out some of the services that we offer. We were founded by 4 managing partners, myself included, as well as Chris McGinley, Ron Schlecht, and Stephen Gill. We've all been around the industry for well over 10 years apiece, and I think we bring a lot of experience to the table. We've held professional services consulting roles, management roles in professional services, and we've also sat on the other side of the desk. So a couple of us have actually worked in the CISO role for fairly large companies. So just to jump right in, we want to talk and very briefly define what an advanced persistent threat is. And the reason we wanted to lead off with this is over the past couple of years, since the term APT has kind of become popular, we've talked with clients, and invariably our conversations have kind of shifted in one way or another. And in the first direction, sometimes our clients will talk to us about how to solve the APT problem. How do we prevent APTs from gaining access to our systems, and what type of solutions, other than what they already have, can they use to detect APTs and find out what they are. And a lot of times the conversations would kind of lean towards the idea that an APT is a new classification of malware. It's an evolved type of Trojan horse, and that's really not the case. An advanced persistent threat is not a piece of single technology. It's not a piece of malware or a Trojan horse. And it's not even the payload of a phishing attack. An APT is actually an organization or a group or an individual that is actively targeting another organization. And they actually have a specific goal in mind. So when you think of an attacker or a group of attackers that may want a particular piece of information, they may be looking for a specific organization or organizations that house that information. They're going to go after them. The advanced persistent threat becomes an issue, obviously, when they do get access to these systems or these organizations, I should say, and then essentially retain access, maintain it, and then throughout the lifetime of that advanced persistent threat, they're constantly exfiltrating data that they're essentially looking for. So again, just to repeat this, when we go through the rest of the presentation, just keep that in the back of your head, that an APT is not a piece of technology, it's an organization. And because it's an organization, we're going to have to look at defenses and detective controls a little bit differently. So who can be an advanced persistent threat? Well, this essentially could be anybody. It's an extremely diverse set of groups. We have organized crime, we have sovereign nations, we have black hat hacker groups, and even security professionals. We can act in the role of an advanced persistent threat. And it can even be individuals, right? So if a particular person has a specific goal in mind, they may go after organizations or groups just as well as the larger organization like a sovereign nation. So what are the goals of an advanced persistent threat? Why are these things here? Why are they attacking, and why are they trying to gain access to these organizations? Well, it's really the same story that it's been, throughout the ages, and they're going after the same types of things. So just a few of those things are intellectual property, personally identifiable information, protected health information, cardholder data, credit cards and whatnot, research and development stuff, so they might be looking for some interesting new blueprints, and of course, bank account numbers. But at the end of the day, the sky's really the limit for these folks, right? It's whatever an organization wants. That's what they're after, right? So it's a little bit ambiguous, but the reality is if you want to look at your organization and say, okay, what is the most important data set that we have here? What would our competitors want? What would a bad guy want with this information? Or what could they do with this information, rather? That's something that an advanced persistent threat might go after. So keep that in the back of your head too as we're kind of going through these things and just kind of envision what an attacker would do in your organization to get access to that data. So real quickly, just some common components in an advanced persistent threat. It's got a life cycle. It's got a methodology. And they typically follow these sets of tasks in order to get what they want. So the first step is reconnaissance, and this is really where an organization or a group decides, okay, we are going to look for a particular set of data, right? We want this type of information. Let's say it's protected health information. I'm a bad guy. I want to see if I can get access to public health record or personal or protected health records so that maybe I can do some identity theft. Maybe I can, just gather that information so that I can propagate a larger scale attack against these individuals once I have their actual information. So once I've got that idea in mind, I want to find some targets. I want to identify organizations that I might want to look at or I might want my organization to target. So, we have things like hospitals, retirement homes, that type of thing. And once we've identified that, really the first goal is to gain that initial unauthorized access to the target. Now this is a very broad and very encompassing bullet point here, and it could really be a lot of different types of attack vectors that someone can choose in order to facilitate gaining unauthorized access. So this is typically, I think the most common attack vector is the spear phishing attack. So this is where an organization might develop a custom piece of malware or a custom payload, and then deliver that in a spear phishing attack where they actually target individual users within the organization and see if they can get them to launch their particular payload. And it doesn't have to be spear phishing. It could be really a lot of different things. So they might be looking for, SQL injection issues in public-facing web applications, and they might just be looking for misconfigurations of devices. It really could be anything, but as long as they can get that initial unauthorized access, they want to get that toehold in your environment. And once they do, the goal of an APT is to propagate access and establish persistent access within the network. So again, we're not talking about an APT being something that is just trying to compromise one host or one service or one application. Once they get in, they want to spread. They want to get as much access within the environment as they can, and they want to establish a foothold in the environment so that that access is persistent, so that they can come back to it a week, 2 weeks, a month, or 3 months later and still have access to that environment. And once they've kind of spread, the goal is to essentially enumerate the internal network and locate where that target data is. So again, going back to the protected health information, what kind of databases house that? What kind of applications are used in this particular organization that might have that information? That's what they essentially do during the enumeration phase. They identify those targets, and then next they attempt to access that data. And this could include things like privilege escalation attacks, brute force against databases. Really could be a lot of different things. But the goal here is to access that data and then exfiltrate it, get it out from the target organization back to their home base. And once they have that information, what they're going to do next is maintain access and continue that data exfiltration. APTs will last as long as you let them. So as long as there is an organization out there that wants that data, that has access to an organization that houses it, they're just going to keep that access, and they're going to keep doing it. So this really looks like a penetration test, okay? Professional services organizations like BTB Security, when we do penetration testing, we want to mimic exactly what an APT does. And this isn't because APTs came out a couple years ago. This is really just what a penetration test is designed to emulate. So we're going to look at your organization. We're going to try to identify what data is important to you, and then essentially do all the steps that an APT would do. And during that exercise, it would allow you to essentially identify the points where, hey, we could detect you here, we prevented access here, and it's really a great way to kind of simulate a real-world attack. But before we go into any type of preventative controls or detective measures, we really wanted to take a minute to talk about marketing a little bit. And as everyone in the industry knows, when the APT came out, there was a big marketing push. It was a little glamorous, right? So real quick, APTs are real. Yes, they're dangerous, but if you want to take a minute just for a quick laugh, you can always Google APT defense. And you're just going to get a slew of articles, of PDFs that essentially talk about how dangerous APTs are, how there's very little chance that you can defend against them, and they throw around zero-day exploitation and social engineering. And really, it's just a lot of fluff. There's not too much to it. And if you want a bigger laugh, you can instead of doing a web search, you can do an image search for advanced persistent threats, and you can get some pretty interesting images. I've seen the words APT literally in flames, and I've seen, I think one of my favorites is a series of Cat5 cables with jaws on them that were attacking this woman as she was defending herself with a laptop. It's really quite silly. But, you know, marketing groups, I think they may even like it more than the term cloud. And, you know, we've seen a lot of real garbage kind of come out of that marketing campaign. And it really spawned when RSA was breached, and it was an advanced persistent threat that caused that breach. And marketers kind of went around and said, well, you know, if RSA can get caught by this, you know, what do you need to do to ensure that you're capable of defending yourself? And, you know, it was really there was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that came along with that stuff. And yes, we're guilty too. We have this presentation that you're listening to right now about advanced persistent threats. But you know, I think you know, what we wanted to do with this one was essentially provide you with a lot of good information that you can use to defend yourself, instead of just, you know, spouting things about zero-day vulnerabilities and the fact that all of your current security controls are worthless. But at the end of the day, if you're talking to a security vendor and they say advanced persistent threat, they say APT, just take what they say with a couple grains of salt there, and you know, really kind of maybe remember this presentation and see if anything that we said kind of jumps out at you as you're hearing that marketer talk about APTs. So to get into the kind of the meat of the presentation is we wanted to talk about preventative measures, right? So what can you do to defend yourself from an APT? And before we go too far, just wanted to mention that there is no solution. There's no turnkey solution for an advanced persistent threat. And I just wanted to include a really nasty quote from a solution vendor. They essentially have a product, and again, I'm not saying it's a bad product. It might be a very good product, but the way they're marketing it is a little absurd. So this quote, real quick, with typo and antivirus included, is firewalls, antivirus, email filters, web gateway, intrusion prevention systems, and other security products are obsoleted by the current threat because they use unexpected attack vectors or zero-day vulnerabilities. And then a couple of paragraphs later, they say, well, if you have our product, then you can see all these things and you can defend yourself. Well, that's a little bit absurd, right? Because layered defense, the whole security is an onion analogy, all that still applies. Advanced persistent threats, like I mentioned, they're just using typical attack vectors, but they use them in more of a penetration testing role. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and APTs always are going to rely on that initial compromise, the ability to propagate access. So as they're doing these things, a lot of the traditional controls that are obsoleted can still be used to defend against that. So really, at the end of the day, a mature security program that properly implements access security controls and safeguards is the first step in defense against an APT. Just some quick bullet points to illustrate that is, you know, if a piece of malware gets on the system and it decides to call home, restricted egress filtering can certainly stop an APT's Trojan that is not configured to use an internal proxy system. So here's a firewall defending you against an APT. Endpoint security, so you know, your typical anti-malware solution. They can stop an advanced persistent threat if that threat utilizes known malware as part of their methodology. Layer 2 defenses, right? So if you have ARP cache poisoning attacks, if you have a compromised host that is now redirecting traffic into your internal environment, layer 2 defenses can stop this. Intrusion prevention systems that subscribes to a known bad IP and fully qualified domain list can stop an advanced persistent threat. You know, things like emerging threats is out there, and malware domain list is out there. So these are freely available IP address and FTDN lists that you can actually use to bolster your defense against these types of things. Because if an APT becomes discovered, those get added to the list, and now you can defend yourself. Security awareness training is a huge one, and this is something where if an attacker is targeting an organization with a spear phishing attack, security awareness training is that first line, or is one of the first lines of defense to prevent an attacker from successfully fooling one of your users into downloading and running their payload. It's a great detective measure too, because if I send a spear phishing attack, something that we also do during penetration tests, and I send it to 20 people, if one of those people says, hey, this looks a little fishy, I'm going to send this over to our IT guy, our InfoSec guy, or girl, you can, essentially start the incident response process after that. And something bad is going on, you can react to it. So the idea that security awareness training is not effective, it's not true. And then lastly, the simple principle of least privilege can stop an advanced persistent threats privilege escalation efforts. So if I'm a bad guy and I get access to one system and I start seeing if I can get access to other systems, see if I can propagate access, well, the principle of least privilege is certainly there to stop me from gaining access to certain systems and applications, or it can at least be a significant deterrent. So frankly, when we see these marketing campaigns that say that traditional security controls are obsolete, or that you cannot defend yourself from advanced persistent threats because they're so dangerous and they're so scary, it's just absurd. And we really wanted to take some time to present this information to you, because there's like I said, there's a lot of misinformation out there about advanced persistent threats and the ways that you can defend yourselves from them. So hand in hand with prevention is detective measures, right? So these are instances where an attacker stumbles and you can identify that and essentially elicit some incident response from that. So the key is continuous monitoring and meaningful alerting, right? So all of those controls that we talked about, all those examples, they're great preventative controls, but if you don't see it, you can't act on it, right? So in the first case where we had egress filtering, we had very restrictive egress filtering, and we see one of our internal workstations try to initiate a connection to China. Now that particular piece of malware isn't configured to utilize an internal proxy server that you have deployed. So it started bumping up against the firewall trying to get out to China. Now it's great that it's not doing it. It's great that the control is in place and it's preventing that access. But we need to be able to see that access in order to start the incident response process. So the idea is we want to monitor for indicators of compromise. These are instances, log entries, alerts, what have you, that will clue you in that something is going wrong. There may be a breach or there may be an attack underway. So a couple of examples, like I mentioned already, maybe a user reports a spear phishing attempt. Hey, I got this email. What do you think? Well, at that point, you can, identify exactly what that payload is. You can maybe take that payload, install it in a sandbox environment, and see what it actually does, and then maybe include some additional detective and preventive controls based off what it does. IDS reports a workstation attempted to communicate to a malicious IP address. So similar to the egress filtering example, if an IDS says something like that, hey, there's something going on here. We need to figure out what it is. And some other examples include, pretty basic stuff. An endpoint security solution generates an alert. Hey, we found this Trojan here. And, sometimes when we talk with organizations, they say, oh, yeah, we definitely have endpoint security. We monitor, and we get alerts quite frequently about, things that come up. And the question we ask them is, well, when those things come up, what do you do? What's the plan of attack after that? They say, oh, well, we clean them, and, we put the system back in production. But we'd argue that in the era of the advanced persistent threat, right, you need to identify where that Trojan came from. You need to identify that root cause and work it back so that you can identify, is there a legitimate threat here, or was it just a one-off piece of malware that the user was infected with? Another great example is audit logs indicating that a user attempts to access a file share that they really don't have any business viewing. So part of the key process with advanced persistent threats is if I've got access to a workstation and I'm a bad guy, I'm going to start looking at all your file shares. Again, something that we do in a penetration test. We're going to look at all these things and see if we can get access to any confidential data or sensitive data. And at the end of the day, if you have audit logs set up and if you have object access logging set up on Windows file server, for example, and you start seeing that unprivileged users start going after the IT or the InfoSec folder on your file share, something's not right here. You know, you can interview that user. Hey, did you have a look at this? No, I've never heard of that. And then maybe you can start the path of incident response to find out what happened. And the last example I think is a good one is the interactive login from a service account. So any instance where you have a service account maybe for your BlackBerry Enterprise server or something like that, and you see it logging into a couple different servers, well, no one should be logging into that. So clearly that's an indicator of compromise. And again, that's just a few examples that might indicate a breach has occurred. But the key point to remember here is that advanced persistent threats are not about exploiting the vulnerability. It's not about finding a SQL injection attack. It's not about the spear phishing attack. Advanced persistent threats, they want to get in, they want to propagate access, and ultimately they want to steal data. So if you make the attacker stumble on a lot of these security controls that you put in place, and you have continuous monitoring to catch them as they fall, you can begin that incident response process. Security has never been about stopping everything, stopping every single attack that exists out there. That's impossible. And again, marketers like to throw, you can't defend against zero-day vulnerabilities, so let's throw our hands up and buy a solution to help defend. That's not the reality of it, right? An attacker exploits a vulnerability, then they're going to do something with that access. Ideally, we're going to stop them from exploiting to begin with, but as they propagate access in the environment, we're going to put up all sorts of different security controls in place so that they start tripping over them as they start propagating access. That's when we catch them. That's when we can begin incident response. That's when we can eradicate them from the environment. So a quick word about incident response. This is something where if you have an indicator of compromise come up, what do you do next? If you think a host has been compromised, what do you do? So incident response is, it's really a broad topic, and I think we could probably spend the next, couple hours actually talking about incident response, the different ways that we can do it. But as it pertains specifically to advanced persistent threats, incident response efforts really need to include the following. Identification of root cause. This is the absolute key. You need to find out what it was that the attacker did to gain that initial point of compromise. If you can do that, then you can start developing a pretty robust timeline of events. So you can identify when they came in, what they did, how they did it, and how they spread. And one of the big pieces of incident response here is to develop customized incidents or IOCs based off the evidence that you've actually already gathered. So a great example that we actually just worked through last week during incident response is we identified an attacker gained access to a web server, and they put a specific piece of code in all of the PHP files throughout the web server. So we wanted to identify specifically what that did, what that PHP code did, and because we were able to identify what servers that PHP code was designed to go out and connect to and when they were accessed, we were able to identify a specific subset of bad IP addresses that were unique to this particular compromise. So once you start developing this timeline, you start identifying specific pieces of malware or specific customized tools that the attacker has utilized to propagate access. You can start developing custom IOCs that you can deploy in your organization to essentially identify what other hosts may have been compromised, what is the extent of this breach, and by developing the timeline, by developing custom IOCs, and by identifying the root cause of the issue, you can really be in a good position to identify containment and eradication strategies. And incident response, of course, would never be finished unless, after the fact, you took a minute to talk about what happened, what went wrong. So once you identify that, you can continue to really improve your information security posture. You can really look at your entire organization as a whole and start really building on some of the issues that were discovered during that particular breach. So it wouldn't be a webinar without some really quick self-serving things about how BTB can help. Clearly, we're not going to talk about any type of solution. We're not going to talk about a turnkey option that you can put in place that will allow you to eradicate the threat of APTs. But going back to the fact that a mature information security program is the first step and the best way to really defend against these types of threats, we have a lot of different complementary services that we think would be pretty advantageous if you're interested. Advisory services, for one. This is something where you can just give us a call. We can talk through options. We can talk through different ways that we can help, and really kind of be there for those instances where if something comes up, you can just give us a quick call and say, hey, BTB, what's going on? We were seeing this. What would you do? All right, or what do you think about this? We can definitely help out on that front. Incident response triage, incident response preparation. These are all, something that we can certainly help out with. Like I said last week, we were just working an incident response project, and we're always ready to essentially jump on those cases as they come up. We really understand that, when those things occur, it can be a very hectic, very frenetic pace to resolving the issue, and we can jump in there. We've been there, we've done that, and we can really provide some expert guidance on that front. And for preparation, if maybe you've watched this webinar and said, you know what, I'm not sure that we're in a good position to really respond to incidents as they occur. We're not really in a good position to identify IOCs. We can certainly help out on that front before the incident occurs. We can help you prepare your environment for it and prepare your organization through policies and procedures so that when things do come up, you have folks that have had first responder training. You have folks who know exactly who to call and what to do when an indicator of compromise shows up. And to that end, we can really help with security incident event management solutions. We've done this for quite a few different companies now, and it's something that really kind of helps out with that continuous monitoring requirement. Again, you have all these security controls. If you're not watching them, they're not really doing their full job, and that's where a SIM can kind of be put in place to generate meaningful alerts and then retain some of the log information so an incident response can be very effective. But again, incident response might also result in a forensic examination. So an instance where an IOC comes up and maybe you say, okay, well, we don't know. Maybe they've gained access to some pretty significant confidential data. We want to kind of tread lightly here. We want to make sure that we gather evidence in a secure manner, in a forensically sound manner. We want to make sure that evidence is chain of custody is retained, all the paperwork is signed and dotted. We could certainly help with that examination as well. But at the end of the day, we really kind of pride ourselves in being a very fast and agile organization. And what we want to do is listen to what your problem is, listen to what your concerns are, and then develop some custom services or solutions that specifically affect or can affect what you're looking at. So whenever you say, hey, we're having problem X, Y, and Z, we're not going to look at our canned solution offering and go, okay, here you go, this is what you need. Oh, you need product B, this is what you need. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, you're very happy with the services that you get. They address precisely what you're looking for, and if you're concerned about advanced persistent threats, if that's an issue that you want to maybe learn a little more about, if you want to maybe assess your environment to determine the level of readiness you are for advanced persistent threats, we can certainly help out on that front. But just to kind of close out the presentation, we want to make sure that you've had a lot of good information about advanced persistent threats that kind of maybe took away some of the smoke and mirrors, some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that you may have observed in other marketing campaigns or other presentations. And they're very real. Advanced persistent threats are some scary things if you look at them, but a mature security program with a lot of good security controls and continuous monitoring can really help bolster your defense against those types of attacks.